The last time we left Emma, she was staring at a letter that promised to change everything. Her heart torn between the past she thought she knew and a future she wasn't sure she could trust. The man who had abandoned her at the altar, Lucas, was cloaked in secrets, while Ethan, the mysterious millionaire who had stepped into her life, offered a fragile glimmer of hope amid the wreckage. Now, with the weight of that message pressing down on her, Emma faces the daunting question: which path will she choose? The tension hangs heavy in the air, uncertainty gripping her every thought as the story moves forward into the unknown. Emma's hands trembled as she unfolded the crisp paper, her eyes scanning the carefully penned words. The letter was unlike anything she had expected, far from a simple apology or a plea for forgiveness. It was a revelation that shattered the fragile world she thought she understood. The message exposed Lucas's deepest betrayal, a hidden truth that twisted everything she had believed about him. Evidence revealed his involvement in secret deals, not just shady business dealings, but a web of lies that reached into the very heart of Ethan's empire. It was more than abandonment at the altar. It was a deliberate act of betrayal, designed to destroy not only Emma's trust, but the lives of those she cared for. As she read, a storm of emotions crashed within her. The heartbreak she had already endured now mingled with anger and disbelief. How could someone she loved so deeply betray her in such a cold and calculated way? The man she had planned to spend her life with had been hiding a darker side all along, one that threatened to unravel not just their relationship, but everything Ethan had worked so hard to build. Yet amid the devastation, a fierce resolve began to take root inside Emma. This betrayal would not define her. It would not break her spirit. Instead, it ignited a fire she hadn't known she possessed, a determination to face the truth head-on and reclaim her life from the shadows of deception. Her mind raced with questions. How much did Ethan know? Was he aware of Lucas's schemes? Could she trust him? Or was this betrayal going to pull her further into a world of lies and danger? Emma realized that the choices before her were no longer about love alone. They were about survival, about standing strong against forces that sought to control and manipulate her. Every step forward now demanded courage and clarity. She could no longer afford to be a passive victim in this story. The letter was a turning point, a mirror held up to the truth she had been avoiding. It forced her to confront the complexity of the people around her, the ones she thought she knew, and the ones she was just beginning to understand. The secret in that letter was a catalyst, setting into motion a series of decisions that would challenge Emma's heart and mind in ways she never imagined. What she chose to do next would not only shape her destiny, but the futures of those entwined with hers in this tangled tale of love, betrayal, and redemption. Emma felt a surge of clarity wash over her, dispelling the fog of confusion and despair that had clouded her mind. She would no longer be defined by Lucas's betrayal or by the pain of being abandoned at the altar. Instead, she would rise not as a victim, but as a force to be reckoned with. Determined and resolute, Emma knew she had to confront Lucas, not in secret, but openly, with the world watching. This was her moment to reclaim her dignity, her voice, and the respect she deserved. When she finally faced Lucas, the tension in the room was almost unbearable. The man who once promised forever now stood exposed, stripped of the charm and secrecy that had masked his true nature. Emma's words were steady and powerful, cutting through the silence with precision. She revealed the evidence she had uncovered, laying bare the extent of his betrayal to those who had admired him. There was shock, disbelief, and whispers rippling through the gathered circle. But Emma stood firm, unwavering. The weight of truth was on her side, and with every word spoken, she felt the chains of betrayal loosen. No longer would she be silenced or sidelined. At the same time, Emma's world was not only about confronting the past, but about forging a future. Ethan, grappling with a crisis threatening his business empire, found in Emma not just a lover, but a steadfast ally. Her strength and insight became a beacon amid the chaos that surrounded him. Late nights filled with strategy and shared worries brought them closer, forging a partnership that transcended the simple trappings of romance. Emma's support was unwavering, and Ethan, once a solitary figure behind his wealth and power, began to open up, revealing vulnerabilities few had seen. Together, they faced the storm, united by a bond that blended trust and respect with a deep emotional connection. Their alliance was not born solely from passion, but from a shared resolve to overcome adversity. Emma's courage and compassion complemented Ethan's drive and resilience, creating a dynamic that empowered them both. As they navigated the challenges threatening to pull them apart, their relationship grew stronger, rooted in honesty and mutual understanding. In this crucible of trials, Emma discovered a new version of herself, one who no longer feared the shadows of the past but embraced the promise of what lay ahead. She was no longer the woman left crying at the altar. She was a partner, a leader, and a force ready to face whatever came next, hand in hand with Ethan. Together, they would not only survive but reclaim their story, rewriting it on their own terms. Trouble never fades quietly, and for Emma and Ethan, peace was a fleeting luxury. Just when their bond seemed unshakable, the world around them began to tighten its grip, clawing at the happiness they had fought so hard to claim. Whispers turned to rumors, rumors into headlines. Ethan's rivals, emboldened by his recent vulnerability, saw Emma as a crack in his armor, a target they could exploit. Anonymous threats began to arrive. Social media buzzed with invasive speculation. A smear campaign surfaced, painting Emma as a manipulator, suggesting she had schemed her way into Ethan's life for fortune and fame. The weight of public scrutiny bore down on her. Even within Ethan's circle, advisors, board members, old acquaintances, suspicion festered. Emma could see it in their eyes. Judgment, doubt, quiet calculation. But what cut deepest wasn't the strangers or the headlines. It was the arrival of Cassandra, Ethan's former lover. Beautiful, poised, and still tangled in the edges of Ethan's past, Cassandra didn't need to say much. Her presence alone was a challenge, a living reminder that Ethan had once loved another, and perhaps hadn't fully let go. For the first time since her world had collapsed at the altar, Emma wavered. Late one evening, alone in Ethan's penthouse, she found herself staring out at the skyline, her heart aching with uncertainty. Could she trust that what they had was real? Or was she simply filling a void left behind by another? Doubt curled around her like fog, and for a moment, the confident woman who had stood up to Lucas now stood silently, unsure of her place in a life so large, so exposed. But Ethan saw it. He felt the shift, the quiet distance in her eyes, the hesitance in her touch. And so one night, he sat across from her, without pretense, without charm. For the first time, Ethan stripped away the image the world knew. He spoke plainly, vulnerably, as a man no longer trying to impress, but to be understood. He told her of his fears, not of losing wealth, reputation, or empire, but of being left behind, of loving someone who could walk away once they saw the fractures he worked so hard to hide. He confessed that with Emma, everything felt unfamiliar, not because she was temporary, but because, for the first time, he didn't feel the need to be perfect. Emma listened, her heart caught between fear and something softer, deeper. This wasn't the polished billionaire the tabloids worshipped. This was a man, raw and flawed, reaching for her not out of need, but out of hope. In that moment, she saw herself reflected in his words, not as someone clinging to love out of desperation, but as someone chosen, someone seen. But the world was not done testing them. A final blow was coming. Something neither of them expected, a truth buried beneath layers of silence that would either break them apart or bind them forever. And as the winds of challenge rose again, Emma and Ethan stood together, no longer as strangers trying to heal, but as partners ready to fight for what they had built. Whatever came next, they would face it, not with fear, but with fire. When the final wave of chaos broke, it was not with the fury of thunder, but with the clarity that only truth can bring. Emma and Ethan stood side by side, the storm around them finally beginning to settle. The lies, the threats, the whispers meant to divide them had been peeled away one by one, not by force, but by unwavering unity. Emma, once seen as a fragile bride left shattered at the altar, had transformed into a woman who refused to be defined by heartbreak. And Ethan, who had built a world fortified by wealth and distance, now opened that world to vulnerability, choosing transparency over control. Lucas, once the man Emma had imagined a life with, found himself caught in the very web he'd spun. Evidence of his manipulations, fraudulent business schemes, emotional deceit, and even a plotted smear campaign against Ethan came to light. The media that had once praised him now turned with brutal accuracy, dissecting his rise and fall. There was no dramatic confrontation, no final plea for forgiveness, just a quiet end. His messages stopped. His name faded from headlines. He became a shadow, a cautionary tale. And for Emma, that silence wasn't empty, it was freedom. With the past no longer clinging to her like a second skin, Emma began to feel something she hadn't in a long time. Peace. In Ethan's presence, there was no performance, no need to measure her words or guard her heart. He saw her not as an extension of his success, but as a reason he had begun to question what success even meant. And she saw in him not a savior, but a partner, someone who had also lived in shadows, who had also wrestled with trust and fear, and had chosen to keep showing up anyway. They didn't rush declarations or orchestrate grand gestures. Their love had grown in the quiet spaces, in the evenings spent reading by the fire, the hand that reached out across a crowded room, the mornings where no words were needed, only presence. One morning, as the city stirred below them, Ethan took her hand and didn't ask for a future. He promised one, not filled with certainty or perfection, but with effort, with truth, with a kind of love that's forged through trial, not fantasy. Emma smiled, not the polite smile she once wore at social events or bridal showers, but the kind that bloomed from somewhere deeper. She had been broken, yes, but not ruined. And with Ethan, she hadn't just found love, she had found home. The past would always be a part of their story, but it no longer owned the ending. Together, they were writing something new, something earned, something real. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting golden light across the quiet balcony where Emma and Ethan stood, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple velvet box. There were no cameras, no audience, no extravagance, just the sound of the wind and two hearts that had found their way back to life. Ethan didn't ask a question. He made a promise, one that didn't erase their pasts, but honored them. A vow to keep showing up, even when it's hard, to build something steady in a world that never stops moving. Emma nodded, tears welling not from pain, but from the overwhelming grace of being seen, truly seen, and loved anyway. She took his hand, not as someone rescued, but as someone ready to rise with him, together. Sometimes love doesn't arrive the way we expect. Sometimes it begins at the end of something we thought would last forever. But healing is possible. Trust can be rebuilt. And even after heartbreak, hope still waits on the other side. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment like Emma's? A time when everything fell apart, only to lead you somewhere unexpected and beautiful? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear how you found your way through. Thank you for watching. If Emma and Ethan's journey moved you, subscribe and stay with us for more heartfelt stories that remind us even the most broken beginnings can lead to the strongest endings.